This case was hidden because the insurance claim was denied after a devastating fire that consumed an entire home. But today, I will tell you how a family's tragedy was manipulated and how an investigation buried deep in the archives reveals the cost of silence. For years, no one dared to speak of it, but one forgotten detail in the file changed everything. It started in Akron, Ohio, in late 2010. Michael Carter, a middle-aged man with a murky past, filed a claim with State Guard Insurance after his house burned to the ground on June 14th. The fire was intense, doused the structure in minutes. No signs of forced entry, no clear cause. The official report was quick, an electrical fault, accidental. But I've seen enough of these cases to know nothing is ever that simple. Would you have noticed the inconsistencies? The fire was suspicious from the start. The house was a modest suburban cul-de-sac. Nothing fancy, but it was Michael's only asset. Yet the insurance company's initial refusal was swift. Filing a claim was met with an outright denial. The reason? Insufficient evidence of insurable loss. They claimed the fire was accidental, but I knew better. I pulled the records. Michael's wife, Danielle Ruiz, was listed as a co-owner. Their daughter, Emily, 8 years old, lived there. The house had been in the family for over a decade, but something was off. The official reports showed no mention of a fire investigation beyond the basic call. No detailed arson analysis, no forensic scan of the debris, just a quick electrical fault. That's when I flagged a red flag. Why wasn't the scene preserved? Why was the insurance denial so abrupt? I requested the case file under FOIA. It arrived, a thin folder containing the police report, the insurance denial, and some witness statements. No fire marshal report, no lab results, just a few lines. Fire caused by electrical malfunction, signed off by a junior investigator. But I knew better. I had seen fires like this before, staged, manipulated. The next step was to track the family. Danielle Ruiz, now a widow, was desperate. She claimed the house was insured and that the fire was sudden and unpreventable. But I found her employment records. She had a part-time job at a shadow clinic, an unregistered medical facility that was linked to some suspicious transactions. Small cash payments, no records of patients, only a few cryptic invoices. When I cross-checked the bank statements, a pattern emerged. Discrete payments to offshore accounts, possibly crypto. And then there was the daughter, Emily. Child Protection Services had no reports of concern, but I ran a background check. Unofficially, I learned Emily had minor injuries, bruises, nothing documented officially. Was the family hiding something? Or was this just the surface of a darker secret? What was the real story behind the fire? I had doubts. I considered arson. But why would someone burn down their home? Insurance scams are common, yes, but this felt different. It felt organized. I dug deeper into Michael Carter's history. A man who'd served time for fraud, ghost clinics, fake prescriptions, illicit money laundering. He had motive and opportunity. But what about the fire? I looked into the local fire department records again. The scene was cleaned up fast, no secondary investigations, no evidence collected. The fire marshal's report, if it existed, was never filed properly. I suspected a cover-up. Then I found it, a hidden communication trail. An internal email from a fire investigator, accidentally leaked in a data dump, hinted at pressure from higher-ups to close the case fast. No official reason given, just a directive. Move along, no further investigation needed. Why? That's when I realized the case was part of something bigger. A shadow operation, perhaps, tied to insurance fraud rings that operated with impunity. Would you have believed the official version? The electrical fault, the innocent family, the quick denial? Or would you have looked closer? Because I did. And I found betrayal. The insurance company, the local authorities, maybe even someone in the family knew the truth but kept quiet. Months passed. I discovered that Michael Carter had secret meetings, coded calls with shadowed figures. I traced some of these to an offshore shell company linked to crypto wallets. It was money laundering. Laundering through fake claims, ghost repairs, and staged disasters. The fire was a piece of the puzzle, a way to cash in on insured assets, erase traces, and vanish. But then came the betrayal. Someone inside the family turned. I uncovered a witness statement from a neighbor who saw a suspicious vehicle parked near the house days before the fire. The neighbor was silenced, threatened. I suspect someone was paid off, or maybe even coerced. The family was not innocent. There was a conspiracy of silence. And yet, something kept gnawing at me. The case was closed, buried in the files, the evidence suppressed. I questioned if justice was ever meant to catch up with them. The insurance denial masked a cover-up. The family's grief was exploited, their tragedy, a pawn in a game they didn't understand. Eventually, the truth surfaced. Arrests, federal indictments, a chain of shell companies exposed, but the damage was done. Michael Carter disappeared shortly after the investigation intensified, possibly fleeing the country. Danielle and Emily vanished from the records, their names erased from the official lists. The house was sold at auction, the case sealed behind a wall of bureaucratic silence. Would you believe that such corruption could thrive under the radar? That families like theirs are used and discarded? I often wonder what really happened that night. Did Michael orchestrate the fire? Did Danielle know more than she let on? Or was she just a victim of the game? This case remains unresolved in many ways. A ghost story hidden in the system, waiting to be uncovered. The files I reviewed are just fragments, a partial truth. Someone decided this case wasn't worth solving. Or, perhaps, it was never meant to be solved. Ask yourself, if this had happened in your family, what would you have done? Would you have believed the official story? Or would you have looked beyond the smoke? Why do you think this was hidden for so long? Who benefits from silence? And if this case were investigated today, how do you think it would end? Every day I'll post a real case from my archive, investigations I solved that still unsettle me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment. It really helps this channel. Stay safe. See you tomorrow. But I can't walk away from it that easily. Once you see the cracks in the official story, you start noticing how many pieces are missing, how many eyes turned away, how many voices were silenced. That fire in Akron wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a node in a much larger network, one built on lies and secrecy. I remember the day I found the coded email, an encrypted message buried beneath layers of false logs, hidden in a server I shouldn't have had access to. It revealed a meeting, a clandestine discussion among people who clearly knew what was really at stake. The phrase, Operation Red Moon, was used, an internal code I later discovered, for a shadow operation involving insurance fraud, covert payments, and manipulation of official reports. If I'd had more time, I would have followed the trail to those behind the curtain, the executives, the corrupt officials, maybe even some law enforcement players who turned a blind eye. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized I was hitting a wall. Someone had built a firewall around the truth. Evidence disappeared, witnesses recanted, and the official channels refused to cooperate. Would you have suspected that the people orchestrating this were closer than you thought? I found a connection between Michael Carter's case and another fire, this one in Fresno, California, 6 months earlier. Similar pattern, a family, a house, claims denied, and then silence. The same shadowy intermediaries involved in both. It's as if someone was testing the waters, refining the method. And what about Danielle? Did she know more than she let on? I uncovered a series of anonymous calls made to her in the weeks before the fire, threats, veiled warnings. Who was behind them? Someone who wanted her to stay quiet, someone who knew that the fire was no accident. I wondered how much she knew, or if she was simply caught in the gears of a machine she couldn't understand. I recall a meeting I had with a confidential informant, an insider from the insurance industry. He told me about ghost claims, about cases where fires were deliberately set, then billed to multiple insurers, creating a loop of untraceable money. The family's tragedy was just one piece in a vast hidden chessboard. Could I have stopped it? Could I have uncovered the full truth before it vanished? I still wonder about that. Sometimes I think about the families I failed to save, the stories I couldn't tell because the system was too deeply compromised. The final blow came when I discovered a document, an internal memo from a senior investigator, marked confidential. It detailed how certain fire cases were approved for quick settlement, with no investigation, no questions asked. This memo was a direct order. Avoid unnecessary delays, settle fast, and keep the lid on these files. That's when I realized the cover-up wasn't just about one fire. It was a systemic operation, a way to quietly cash in and bury the evidence. And then there was the ultimate betrayal. I learned that someone close to the family had lied during the initial investigation, an alibi that didn't hold up, a witness who suddenly disappeared. Was it a coincidence? Or was it part of a larger scheme to protect the real perpetrators? I've sat with these questions for years. I've questioned whether the system can ever truly be trusted when money and silence override justice, and I've come to accept that some truths are better left hidden. Still, I can't ignore the signs, the inconsistencies, the hidden files, the unspoken agreements. If I could go back, would I have pushed harder, Would I have exposed the entire network sooner? Perhaps. But I know now that some secrets are kept because revealing them could topple entire corrupt structures. And some families, like Danielle's and Emily's, are just collateral damage in a war they don't even understand. So I leave you with this. Trust what you see, but question what you don't. Because behind every burned house there might be layers of lies, and behind every silence, a story begging to be uncovered. Remember, this file was never meant to be released, but I've shown you enough. The truth is out there, hidden in the shadows of the system, waiting for someone brave enough to look. And if you've listened this far, you're searching for the truth. Subscribe, I'll show you the next case. Because these stories don't end. They just wait in the archives, ready to be uncovered, one secret at a time. But even as I step back from this particular case, I realize it's only the surface of something far darker. I kept asking myself, who else was involved? Who profited from the cover-up? And most importantly, what was the real motive behind all of this? The more I pieced together, the clearer it became that the fire was a distraction from the real money, the real power. I uncovered a network of shadow clinics, shell companies, and offshore accounts, all linked to a few key players. These weren't just insurance scams. They were part of a clandestine operation, possibly tied to organized crime, that used disasters like fires to clean the slate and funnel untraceable funds. I found that some of the money from these operations was being laundered through crypto wallets, hidden behind layers of false identities. It was a web designed to keep investigators like me in the dark, to make sure the truth never surfaced. But I knew the pattern. Burned homes, ghost claims, families pushed aside, all orchestrated to hide the real purpose: profit at any cost. And then there was the family's silence. How much did Danielle know? Or was she simply a pawn? I discovered that her brother, Marcus Hall, a man with a checkered past, had been seen near the scene days before the fire. He had motive. Financial desperation, maybe, yet no official charges were ever filed against him. I suspect someone in the system protected him. Would you believe that in the US, these operations are often shielded by a network of complicit insiders, lawyers, insurance adjusters, even some local officials? They all have a role, silent partners in a dangerous game. I found evidence of off-book meetings, coded conversations, and payoffs designed to keep the truth buried. For years, I wondered how many other families had been sacrificed. How many fires, how many claims, all part of this silent cartel. I know now that the system protects its own, and that stories like Michael Carter's are just the tip of the iceberg. The real story is about power, money, and the lengths some will go to keep their secrets safe. I remember a night I stayed late, sifting through digital files, when I stumbled upon an encrypted folder labeled Operation Red Moon Files. Inside, there were documents, witness testimonies, even recordings, evidence of a coordinated effort to manipulate the insurance process, stage fires, and silence anyone who got too close. But the files were corrupt, incomplete. Someone had tried to erase their tracks. If someone had told me 30 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it. The system is supposed to protect us, to serve justice. But I saw firsthand how it can be weaponized, how families are used as pawns, how tragedies are exploited for profit. And in the back of my mind, I keep asking, how many other cases are out there, buried just like this one? How many families are still living in shadows, unaware of what really happened? I wonder if the truth will ever come to light, or if it's destined to stay hidden behind a wall of bureaucratic lies. There's a final layer I uncovered, an internal memo from a senior investigator marked classified, instructing to limit investigations to superficial findings only. That's when I realized the cover-up was systemic. It wasn't just one rogue actor. It was an institution protecting its own. The fire was a way to cover up something bigger: the laundering, the fraud, the manipulation. And I think about Danielle, Emily, and the others who suffered because of it. Were they simply collateral damage in a game they couldn't understand? Or was someone within their own circle complicit? I have my doubts. I believe the truth lies in the silence of the witnesses who were threatened, the documents erased, and the deals made behind closed doors. If I could do it all over again, I'd push harder. I'd fight to expose the entire network. But I know now that some truths are dangerous, more dangerous than most people realize. They threaten the very foundations of the system, those who profit from its secrecy. So I leave you with this. Question everything. When you hear stories of accidents, think of the layers behind them. When you see a family broken by tragedy, wonder what's hiding in the shadows, because what you don't see is often the real story. This file was never meant to be released, but I've shown you enough to see that the truth is out there, waiting in the dark. If you've listened this far, consider it a warning. These stories aren't just about the past. They're about who still controls the narrative today. And this is only one case. There are many more, buried deep in the archives, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. Subscribe, and I'll keep revealing what the system tried so hard to hide. Because the truth, once uncovered, can never truly be buried again. Yet, even with all I uncovered, I knew I was just scratching the surface. The deeper I dug into the network behind Michael Carter's fire, the more I realized how interconnected everything was. An intricate web spun with deliberate precision. The more I followed the money, the clearer it became that this was not an isolated scheme. It was a well-oiled machine, operating across multiple states with layers of cover-ups and plausible deniability. In my review of the case files, I found references to other accidents in cities like Queens, Fresno, and even Travis County, Texas. Each one bore eerily similar signatures: families burned out, claims denied or dismissed, and a pattern of suspicious activity that pointed toward a coordinated effort. It wasn't coincidence, it was a pattern, a modus operandi designed to maximize profit while minimizing scrutiny. I remember pulling the records for a family in Fresno, their house destroyed in a blaze that was officially ruled accidental. But I recognized things I'd seen before: the timing of the insurance claim, the quick settlement, the absence of a thorough investigation. When I examined the financial transactions linked to the claim, I found a series of shell companies funneling money through offshore accounts. Money that was not just about insurance fraud, but about laundering illegal gains from other shadow operations. Would you have believed it if I told you that some of these shell companies had ties to organized crime groups, or that certain officials in local agencies had received consulting fees to keep quiet? I even found a record of a meeting, an off-the-books conference, where a protocol was discussed: how to set fires, how to file false reports, and how to make sure the evidence disappeared. And yet, the families, those families who lost everything, were kept in the dark. I found a clue in a witness statement from a neighbor who saw a strange vehicle parked near the Fresno house the night before the fire. When I approached him, he recounted threats from an anonymous caller, warning him not to interfere. That's when I realized the entire operation depended on silence, intimidation, and complicity. Did Danielle Ruiz know the full extent of what was happening? Did she suspect that her family was being used? I found her name in a series of encrypted emails, coded language, but I deciphered enough to see references to cleanup, payment, and operation status. It was chilling. She was caught in a web of lies, maybe even coerced, perhaps just a pawn in a larger game. I wondered how many other families had been sacrificed before I ever started looking, how many fires were staged, how many claims manipulated, all to serve the interests of those at the top. The truth is, in this country, financial greed often trumps justice, and insurance companies, those supposed protectors, are sometimes complicit in the cover-ups, especially when the stakes are high enough. I came across a report, an internal audit from a national insurance consortium, that suggested a pattern of quick settlements in certain high-risk areas. These settlements often bypass thorough investigations, leaving behind only superficial reports. It was a systemic flaw, a loophole exploited by insiders. Someone had made a decision: settle fast, settle hush, and move on. And I can't help but wonder, what if I had been able to expose this entire operation years ago? Would the families have had a chance at justice? Would the system have changed? Or was it always meant to be hidden, protected by those who benefit from the secrecy? The final blow came when I discovered an internal memo hidden deep within a secure server, explicitly instructing investigators to avoid probing too deeply into suspicious fires. The language was clear: keep the lid on the truth. These were orders from the top, an explicit directive to keep the operation under wraps to maintain the illusion of innocent accidents. I remember feeling the weight of it all, knowing that somewhere, in some office or courtroom, those responsible continued to operate, protected by layers of bureaucracy and corruption, that the families, like Danielle and Emily, were just casualties in a larger, ruthless game. If you think this is over, think again. Because every piece of evidence I uncovered points to a network far more extensive than I ever imagined. It's not just about one fire, one family, or one insurance claim. It's about a system that's willing to sacrifice truth for profit. And I ask you, if this was your family, your home, your life, what would you do? Would you accept the official story? Or would you question everything? Because the truth is, sometimes the fires we see are just the surface of something much darker burning beneath. This file, this investigation, was never meant for the light of day. But I've shown you enough. The shadows are real, and they hide secrets that could shatter the foundations of trust. And if you've listened this far, consider yourself part of the investigation now. Subscribe, and I'll keep exposing these hidden truths. Because the more you know, the harder it becomes for them to keep the secrets buried. And that's the only way we might finally bring some justice to the families left in the ashes.